Coping skills are the methods you use in which to overcome, deal with, or help you through a certain experience. Negative coping skills are methods where you intend to harm yourself, break possessions, or hurt someone else. Positive coping skills are methods where you intend to heal yourself, take a break from work or school, or to just rejuvenate. Today's episode is all about coping skills. Before we get to that, just a reminder that the holiday season is indeed upon us. So we'll be ending season 1 on the 21st of December, and we'll return January 11th. Your support has meant the world to me, and I know it means a lot to the guests we have. Speaking of which, we have a new guest speaking with us today, Tori, and we have 2 returning guests for this episode, Brooke and Sam. So this episode will focus on how our 3 guests learned to cope, and then I'll explain why it's important to learn how to positively and effectively cope with negative experiences. It matters. So let's get right on with it.
Let's sit in bed and watch the sun paint my window. The light comes through and bathes our lives in red. Let's go outside and watch the leaves fall above us. Soft wind on your skin turns your head.
It's Brooke, and I want to talk to you guys about depression. So I've had this since I was 4. But I didn't know about it until I was 8. Imagine for a second that one day you just have no motivation for life. Now imagine being 4 and waking up and wanting your life to end. Feeling completely alone. Not wanting to get out of bed and being forced to go out and play. That's how I felt. You see, my dad left on a quote-unquote trip. And this particular morning I realized he wasn't coming back. Not long after, I found out he died, and not long after that, I tried to kill myself for the first time. And I've been trying to do it many different ways since. For a long time, I just ignored it. It became my new normal, not wanting to wake up and going to bed hoping I don't. As time went on and my experiences got worse and worse, my depression did too. I eventually learned what depression was after my mom died, and I told the grief counselor I was forced to see that I wanted to be dead like her. I was 8 and didn't really understand death, but I knew enough to know that was what I wanted. Because of my fear of pills, I never took antidepressants, but I had chunks of time when my depression wasn't ruling my life. I had other points when that was exactly what depression was doing. I was controlled by it. I still am. I've never received proper treatment, but I learned that with friends and family and doing things that I loved, I could manage it. I could choose life. When I'm depressed, I push the world away. I don't want people to tell me I should live. I don't want people to tell me it gets better. I just want to disappear, to be invisible, and at the worst, not exist at all. I have to say that the only organization out there that really taught me anything about depression, or pretty much any mental illness, was Active Minds, that I got into at Ohio Wesleyan. But I learned a lot from my friends who struggle with it too. Now, on to how I coped. Music for one, friends for another. Surrounding yourself with people you love helps. Listening to music that saves your life helps. In the midst of my depression freshman and sophomore year of high school, I listened to Lullaby by Nickelback nonstop. It really annoyed my friends. It was a constant reminder that even if I didn't think it, deep down I had people to live for and I wanted to live for them. I used this until I wanted to live for myself. And every time I go back into that place, I remember who I love and who loves me, and I love them and want to live for them until I can live for myself. I write like crazy. I cry. I force myself to go out with friends, to go to school, to do whatever. I listen to music and watch my favorite shows until I get sick of it. I read my favorite books. I do the things I love and be with the people I love until I finally realize that living is something I want to do for me, not just something I'm forcing myself to do. I haven't felt suicidal in a long time, but I still have suicidal thoughts and thoughts of self-harm. I still self-harm to this day. In fact, I still self-harmed a month ago. But then I remember that this is a battle, and that sometimes we make mistakes and have setbacks and obstacles, but we can come out on top, and we will. I hope you remember this too. You will come out on top, and you'll always struggle with depression, but you'll always have those times when it's not the biggest struggle in your life. You'll get through this. You really, really will.
Hi, my name is Tori. I am a freshman in college right now, and today I'm going to be talking about my eating disorder. This isn't something that I typically talk about a lot. It's something that I still struggle with, and it's kind of hard to talk about something that you still struggle with when I could wake up tomorrow and it could be screaming at me. But I could also wake up tomorrow and I could be screaming at it, you know? Also, with the way that it's viewed in the media, eating disorders have different views. There's different views of eating disorders and how they should look, versus how they actually look in the media, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. I first realized that I had an eating disorder. It was brought to my attention by my very first boyfriend, my ex-boyfriend, and although we were in a very abusive relationship, I was being emotionally abused by him. He did care about me in his own way, I guess, which I'm thankful for, because if it wasn't for him, and a few other people, but if it wasn't for him reaching out to my friends to get in touch with my parents, I would not be here to talk to you guys today, because I would have taken my own life that night. I discovered that my eating disorder was a severe issue. I guess the first time was in my freshman year. So around the time when I was suicidal, I was self-harming, and it was just, I was not in a very good headspace at all. I went and I was hospitalized. I was hospitalized for self-harm and for suicidal tendencies. I was not hospitalized for an eating disorder, because I guess I didn't realize I had one, so I didn't talk about it. And I just thought that was kind of normally how people felt, and I didn't know that in fact was not something people should subject themselves to feel. I guess I have some pretty okay coping skills for it. I found myself, I've relapsed more with my eating disorder than I have with self-harm. I am just about 4 years clean, 3 3/4 years clean on self-harm. Yes, a little clap, little snap. But it would be the same little clap, little snap if it was 2 days clean, because any day you refrain and you treat yourself the way you deserve, you treat yourself positively and in a healthy way, any day, it's an accomplishment. So anyone listening who is struggling with that kind of thing, you're doing good. You're on the right track. Just keep up the self-love. And that's the same thing I could say with anyone with an eating disorder. I know with myself, as far as coping skills go, I kind of have weird coping skills for it. I drink a lot of tea, which I don't drink a lot of tea because I used to drink green tea because I was told that green tea would help you lose weight. So there was a period in my life where I would only eat crackers and drink green tea. A lot of girls in my school told me that it was chic. A lot of people said that they wanted to get on my diet because they needed to lose weight before prom. People told me that I was doing a good job and that it was going to help me out and that I was going to look so much better by the time that I was through with it. Things that I guess they were taught is the right thing to say. Or maybe that's something that they just believe themselves, but it just goes to show how prevalent it is in the media. But drinking tea, I think, helps me out in certain ways, because not only did I restrict how much I ate, I also overate a lot, because I would restrict for so many days and I would be so lightheaded and so nauseous that I would just eat everything in front of me, which also is just very unhealthy. And portion control is another big thing. I found myself now, with what I know now of eating disorders, now that I'm more educated on how to love myself more, I guess, I just find myself making sure that I eat the right amount every day. Like, even if I don't want to eat, even if I'm afraid, like, just making sure that I have something, even if it's a little breakfast bar in the morning instead of like a full course breakfast meal with 2 eggs and bacon. And that does sound nice right now, but and I think a big thing for me, and some days this doesn't work and some days this does, looking in the mirror can be a coping skill, which sounds a little crazy for some people, because I know when I wake up and I'm not having a good day, if I look in the mirror, I'll probably cry. Probably. And I know a lot of people else who, a lot of other people that I know that are like that. On their bad days, on their good days, their good days could turn into bad days by seeing themselves at the wrong angle. And I feel like I'm at a state in my life where not every day is like that, but I do have my days, and I feel like I'm always going to have those days. But the important thing to remember is just not be too hard on yourself. That's something that I like. I have a little mantra that I repeat to myself, and it's just, you'll be okay. You're all right. You're doing okay. Just little things that I repeat to myself over and over, just to remind myself that, like, I'm doing okay. Because at the end of the day, I know a lot of people will say that, oh, weight isn't everything, and then if I say, no, I'm a fat girl, I'm proud of that, I'm a little thick and that's okay, and people be like, no, you're not, you're beautiful. Who said beautiful is not synonymous with the cellulite on my thighs? Who said beautiful is not synonymous with the stretch marks on my stomach? Who said? Who said beautiful is not synonymous with the cellulite on my arms? Who said that? No one. So when you wake up in the morning, a big thing for me, I look in the mirror, and even if I don't like initially what I see, I make sure before I leave the house or before I go to bed that day that I appreciate what I see in the mirror, at least one part of what I see in the mirror every day, something new every day, so that I have a list, a cohesive list of things that I like about myself, so that when I think about, oh, maybe I should stop eating so that gets smaller. Maybe I should do this so that this is so that I look better. So that I'll look better and for bikini season. It's a struggle. It's a long process, and it's a struggle. And if anyone out there is struggling with it, and you're listening right now, you're doing a good job, and I'm proud of you. Even if you just relapsed, I'm proud of you, because now it's never too late to keep moving forward and to keep being good to yourself, even if you were just horrible to yourself, even if you just did something that could hurt yourself. You always have the chance to keep going and to move forward and to be okay. Always. You always have that choice. I'm going to end this with something that a therapist told me once that really helped break through to me, and I hope it breaks through to someone listening today. I want you to picture that you have a little sibling and they're right in front of you. And if you have a little sibling that you love, imagine them. If you have a little sibling that you don't get along with, imagine that you do get along. Or even if you don't, you still have that affection for them because they are your sibling. Or if anything, just imagine a sibling for yourself. For all my fellow only children out there, just imagine yourself a sibling, and I want you to look at them, and they're going to be younger than you, and they're crying, and they're throwing up because they stopped eating, or they're throwing up because they ate too much, because they want to be pretty, they want to be thinner. And I want you to hug them, and I want you to pull back, and I want you to see yourself, because at the end of the day, that's us. And I want you to love yourself and appreciate yourself always.
So what my experience was like at first, my experience was normalized for sure. To give a little bit of a backstory, I run a project talking about rape culture and sexual assault and sexual harassment, and it raises awareness about the issue and about how prevalent it is in our society and how we can change it and advocate for each other and advocate for victims. And for me, my experience is that I was raped and I was in a sexually abusive and physically abusive relationship as a 14-year-old girl, my first love, my best friend at the time, and he had been my best friend for years. And to me, I had never been in love. There was nothing in my life that told me that what was going on was normal, without getting into too much detail for the sake of the podcast and getting all this information out. But there was nothing in my life telling me that this was normal other than him. But a lot of the things that happened in the relationship, the things he would show me, the things he would say to me, and the fact that I didn't have education on consent and all of those things, I wasn't aware of the severity of the issue. I knew it felt wrong. I knew him raping me and hurting me. It felt wrong, but I didn't have any education on it, which sounds crazy being, almost 18, thinking about the fact that 4 years ago, I didn't know what consent was, and a lot of people were already having sex and getting involved in that culture, and we weren't aware of what consent was. And for me, the moment I realized it was as severe as it was, is it felt severe, but I was telling myself it wasn't, because I was kind of taught that was normal in a society or in a relationship because of my lack of education, my lack of awareness, and my lack of experience. And when I first realized it was when I realized that it was normal to hate this because it was such a bad thing and I wasn't overreacting, I wasn't being crazy, that I genuinely had a valid response, and that this was a response that was necessary and not over dramatic, was when a boy that I was very, very close with at the time was on the phone with me the night that he raped me the second time, but was the first time that he took my virginity. And I know that's not specific, but I would prefer to keep the details out, again, for the sake of talking about trauma. The moment that I realized it was, I groaned in pain while we were on the phone, and he immediately stopped what he was saying and said, what's wrong with what happened? And I said, again, this isn't the guy who did it, this is a friend. I said, it hurts. And I already told him that we had sex, and I didn't know the difference between consent and consensual sex and rape at the time, so I said that we had sex, and his response to that was, I don't think it's supposed to be that way. And I said, it's always that way when he touches me, that's just the way it is. And this boy got very, very quiet, and it was like you could have heard somebody's thoughts in that moment of silence. And he just sighed, and it seemed like he put together all of the bruises and the way I changed when this guy was around, and it just, things I didn't even realize I was doing or rationalizing, he put them all together in that moment. And him reminding me that there's an issue here, and validating that for me, as dumb as it sounds, I was a kid and I was being told that what you're feeling is normal and you're not crazy. And it was the first time that I realized how severe of what was really going on to me. And it took me 3 years up to this point to get to the level of knowing how severe and how prevalent this topic is, because in exploring and reconciling and the level of forgiveness that I've found in this, and the level of positive coping that has come out of things, and I see that these other topics are depression and eating disorders, which were two parts of my coping, not in terms of the fact that they helped, but the fact that they were part of me deteriorating myself for somebody else's actions. And I did develop eating disorders and depression at a very young age due to these things, and I was already being bullied, and on top of that, all of this was happening. So it all does tie in together. And at first, that is how I coped. And then, when I realized that, I wasn't crazy, and that something had happened to me that people aren't supposed to deal with, people aren't supposed to go through, and me harming myself, whether it was physically or whether it was my eating disorders, which are, another form of putting yourself through physical pain, and, being depressed and not really knowing what to do. It was this weird thing where I coped first by having the eating disorders, or developing them and encouraging them within myself, and then, cutting myself and starving myself and, binging and purging. And then, I was so severely depressed that I thought that that was normal again, and I was normalizing painful experiences and painful things to then, try to cope when I was really just regressing instead of progressing. And it later, and that's a different question, so I'll answer that later. But to continue with the questions, who did you talk to about this issue? It really started with me talking to myself. I didn't really talk to anybody about it. I had gotten out of the situation through various lucky but harmful chains of events that allowed me to distance myself from this person and ultimately end the relationship. And I didn't talk about it to anybody at first. It was like I kept it to myself, and then slowly but surely the guy who was there that night with me, I told him, and then I opened up to 4 of my closest friends about it, and then, slowly but surely it was only those people for like 6 months to a year. And then I had this massive kind of change of wanting to say something, because this guy not only went from sexually harassing my friends in school post our relationship, sorry, I misspoke, not only sexually harassing me in school post our relationship, but then sexually harassing my friends. And that's when I stepped up, and it was like this savior complex that I developed of like, I need to do something because these girls are too scared to do it. And that was the first time that I spoke about it, because I wanted to defend a friend. And then from there, it was like I kept talking about it, but not to people. It was like to friends. And not that those aren't people, but like not to a society. I was talking about it to school officials and my friends, but that was like the scope of it, and nobody was really listening, in my opinion. And then I told my family, and I got mixed responses, but overall it has turned into 100% support. And then something crazy happened. I went through a really bad breakup that was separate from this relationship, and I had been complaining about my hair. My hair. Like, it's so annoying. It was down to my hips, and I was like, it's so long. Like, I love how it looks, but it's so long. Like, I'm so done with it. And like, I want to cut it off. And every day I'd throw it up in a bun, and I hated it. And my friend finally turned to me and said, you're cutting it off. And that day we cut off all my hair, dyed it blonde. It was, I think, pink and blue at the time. And I got it dyed blonde within the next few weeks. And there was something about doing that was so empowering to me, because my hair was a safety blanket. My hair was something that I had throughout this whole experience that I would change, and it was long, and it was colored, and it was crazy, and it was like this safety blanket. And that was really how I began talking about it, as I slowly but surely kind of talked about it as I coped. And then I healed through doing something as dumb as cutting my hair. And then from there, it was like this full force throttle of like, I want to do something to change my life. If cutting my hair can change my entire mindset and my view of myself, then, I can, like, anything can change something. And from there, I just started working on my project now, which is Start the Conversation Project, which advocates for, telling your story and getting your story out there, and, advocating against rape culture, and advocating for change, and advocating for girls to stop calling each other sluts, and, us to stop normalizing an issue that we don't even realize we're normalizing. Like, that's the point of my project, that I don't think we realize that we're normalizing a rape culture, but we are. And that's really how I started it. It was like just me coping and dealing with it in such awful ways, and becoming dependent, and, having eating disorders, and being depressed, and hurting myself, and putting myself through all this emotional trauma, further than the emotional trauma that was already kind of forced upon me. And then, I'm not saying that depression was a choice. And I'm not saying that these eating disorders were necessarily a choice, because I did choose to do them, but they were part of a psychological process that was forced upon me, and that was the way I coped. And I kind of stood up at one point and said, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was hard, because some people can do that and some people can't. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And that's how I then translated my coping into change. And like I said, I talked about my friends. They were supportive, but in the way that they were like, oh, that's awful. Like, they didn't know what to do. Like, they genuinely didn't understand, and they didn't get it. And even talking to people who wanted to help, it was like, even though it was their job to understand, they didn't seem to, which is crazy, because then you meet people like Jack who know kind of like what's up, and he's a 19-year-old kid. And, it's these adults that like weren't even receptive to what I was saying, because they didn't want to believe it. And my friends, like, they didn't even understand it, but they were, like, trying to be there, which I really appreciate. But there was this lack of education coming from my elders and the people who were supposed to be helping me, which didn't help my friends be able to help me, but they did their best. I was definitely bullied because of what happened, for sure. I know that a boy that I had dated and I recently reconnected, and not in a romantic way, in a friendly manner, we did reconnect due to this project, and he told me that for years he's defended me against people because they never understood what happened. They just knew that, you know, my relationship went from seeming perfect to me having this huge grievance with this guy and being very upset and depressed, and I changed very, very quickly, and I was still a good person, and I was still doing good things to everybody but myself. And it was very, like, clear that there was an issue, and people definitely treated me badly. And I think, you know, I went through a really bad breakup 2 years later, and I hadn't fully coped with what happened, and going through that really kind of brought forth a lot of these issues, because I would cry about it to this guy, and now this guy was, like, gone, and I was dependent on that love and acceptance to feel as if I need, like, that was my validation. And I was definitely, what that has to do with being pushed away is that I had like 5 or 6 best friends, and we were all girls. We were all very, very close. And my best friend, when I needed help through this breakup and through then kind of coping with the anxiety and the stress, like, I had such anxiety from this issue, from being raped, that, you know, it affected, you know, how I coped with this breakup. And then my friends, I was there with them for everything. I was there. I was always the mom friend. Like, I always helped everybody. And, you know, when I needed help, you know, for a few months I needed help, and they just weren't, you know, I was there for them every day for 3 years, and they just dropped me. This girl just, like, was there for a few months, and then out of nowhere, just like, I don't want to be your friend, and I'm not going to tell you why. And from that, 2 other girls followed that were my very close friends, and they all, you know, 2 of them were friends. The one girl who did it first hated them, and now they're all best friends and do sports together. And it's so fake and hard, because I feel like an awful person because of what I went through, because of somebody else's choice to harm me. And I went through a psychological process that damaged me, and some of the things I did were a choice, but at the end of the day, you know, I didn't have a choice in what my mind told me and what, you know, the chemicals in my brain were saying needed to happen to deal with this issue. And I was very much harassed because of it and dropped, and, you know, kids were very mean to me. The football team, a lot of the guys, you know, didn't want to deal with me because this was one of their friends. And there's been a lot of backlash, but there's also been a tremendous amount of support. And that's what I find incredible, is that, you know, the backlash is always going to be hard and it's always going to suck, but the amount of people you help and that, you know, will support you and, you know, actually see you're speaking out as support for them, even if it doesn't directly have anything to do with them, is incredible. And the support far outweighs the negativity, and not because there's more of it, but because it's more powerful. And the way I coped with that was simply to do things like cutting off my hair, starting a project like this, you know, dressing differently, stop wearing all black all the time. I love black. I was in this huge emo phase. I, you know, loved this dark, you know, very deep music, and I had to get myself out of that because I was just reminding myself of what was making me sad, of all these issues I had with society. And instead of sitting there and listening to music that, you know, made me sad, even though I still love sad music, I started listening to empowering music and music that really felt real in a constructive way and talked about issues in a way that wasn't, you know, pushing away society. And not that I condemn that music, it's incredible, but that I needed that change for me because that's what, you know, was best for me. And I coped through that through changing a few things in my life, whether it be the media I consumed, whether it be the way I dressed or the way I presented myself. And also with the way that I, you know, was punishing myself for things that weren't my fault. And I really just, it was like this thing where I kind of turned around and I was like, you know, fuck this. And I'm sorry if you have to bleep that out, but like, fuck that. Like, it was this overnight, like, just hating myself and knowing that, like, I didn't have a choice in this. I just had to cope with it the best I could, to waking up one morning after cutting my hair and just being like, you're fucking strong and you're important and you're powerful and you matter. And it was like this, it's from cutting my hair to dealing with rape and coping and taking that to helping other people. Like, for me, it was just like this incredible moment of cutting off a safety blanket. And that's really how I coped and overcame it. I did that and I felt fucking empowered, and I decided to use my empowerment of cutting off my hair to empower other girls to cope with the rape and get out of those situations and not be victims and defend themselves, and to fight against a rape culture so they don't have to deal with that in order to cause change. As dealing with coping, I was not hospitalized. It was threatened, but it never happened because I kept a lot of the things that I was doing, although they were noticeable that I didn't have physical health on my side, that it didn't seem like I was harming myself. It seemed like I was tired, and I was very good at hiding it. And personally, I didn't ever want to be hospitalized, and not because I had a fear of it, but because I knew for me it wasn't the right answer. But I know plenty of people who have been hospitalized or who should be, because their personalities and their coping mechanisms, would really benefit from that sort of proper counseling. I just know personally that it wasn't right for me. So my treatment was very not self-indulging, but my treatment was very self-empowered, and it was very internal for me. It came from the internalness, it came from an internal place of introspectiveness, and I've always had that, and I think that this just amplified it. This experience amplified, being sexually assaulted and raped, especially by somebody you love, when you don't know the difference between rape and consent because you're so young. Like, that's a lot to swallow in, 10 seconds, let alone as a 14-year-old girl who has no idea how the world works, living in a town that's literally a bubble to everything bad, yet kind of harbors it and doesn't even recognize it. And for me, it was like, that was my coping. It was being introspective and being reflective on my experiences and just having that internal strength. And that was something that I am lucky enough to be raised in a family and in a home, and surrounding myself with people who believe in those things and really support, whether it was that I needed to be hospitalized to get help from others or whether it was helping myself. I was just very aware that I needed to do what was right for me, and I was very lucky to have that internal awareness. Whether I was born with it or whether it was built, I don't know, but it's been there for a very long time, and I was very lucky that I myself had that mindset and that I can now share that mindset with other people. I already talked about how I coped more positively a lot, which I think was important to talk about directly after negatively. My coping skills, honestly, had nothing to do with an institution. It had to do with actually the negativity that I experienced through this, and just going like, what's the point in going through something bad if you don't turn around and do something with it if you're able to? Because not all people can do that. Not all people can get past that psychologically or, emotionally. And, we have to empower those people to continue treatment and to continue getting help, and to empower them to be confident in themselves and to try to change that for them and help them do that without shaming them. But for me, victimhood was very much a choice after a certain point. There was a certain point where I had coped with what happened, and continuing to dwell on it would have been a choice. And it would have been an understandable choice, but it still would have been a choice in my situation and with what I experienced in the way that I coped. And it didn't feel natural in the sense that it took a lot of work to get to where I am, but it was always something that was part of me and not part of anybody else. And it was natural in terms of that it was a process, but it came from myself. Again, my coping skills, the question is, what coping skills helped you better than others? What coping skills do you recommend? I recommend non-self-destructive things. I recommend, if you have eating disorders, to look in the mirror and find 5 things that you like about yourself. And if you can't find 5 things you like about yourself, find 5 things you can tolerate. For me, it was my eyes, my waist, the pinkish color in my cheeks, this actually wasn't external, but my confidence, or my ability to fake confidence when I was in pain, And I don't know how to describe this without sounding insane, but my beauty, and not beauty in the sense that I was physically anything better than anybody else. I am confident in the way I look and how I feel, and I do feel like I do deserve to call myself beautiful, and I deserve to feel that way. But in terms of I was a beautiful person, I was a good person who was just trying to do the right thing, and I didn't always, but I was willing to own up to that and try to, change as a person and try to help other people and really just try to grow and thrive off of bad situations. So for me, it was like finding a few things that I liked and enhancing them. I knew I was a good person. What can I do with that? I knew that I loved my eyes, so what did I do? I put makeup on around my eyes that enhanced that so that was a focal point. I liked my waist, so I wore clothes that hugged my waist a little tighter, because when I looked at myself or when I felt my body, I knew like something I love about myself was being portrayed to the rest of the world. It was things like that where I went from hating my body to loving my body because I accepted the fact that I don't like my thighs, but, there's nothing wrong with them. I just don't like me because it's me. And it was, again, like this overnight thing of changing one thing about myself and recognizing one thing that I loved made me really love everything else, because one thing accented something else and one thing made me accent another thing. And over time, I just embraced my entire being, which I think ties into Tori's talk about eating disorders, is that there are positive ways to, even for a day, just get yourself to eat a meal. And it's not always like that for everybody, but at least for me, if you are one of those people that can build yourself up through internal dialogue, then doing things like that, putting Post-its on your mirror, writing things on your hand. Like a lot of the time when I was upset, I would write the statistic of women who reported to be raped in their lifetime, because I thought that number defined me. But when it came to, me coping, I started writing eyes, hair, smile, legs, waist, beauty, strength, love, all of those things on my wrist. And now, I got to experience walking around with the number 1 and 6 on my chest in a way that was, I did it on the day of our football team's third consecutive championship, because I had grievances with the coaches and a boy on that team who encouraged rape culture, and actually one of the boys on the team was a witness to my rape. And I wore that as a way of educating, and I got to change that number from meaning something negative to something positive through writing it on my skin. And there's something incredible about writing something on your skin and not having it be defining, but have it being empowering, whether it be something negative that you're choosing to make positive, whether it be something positive that you're reminding yourself of. It's an incredibly easy way to remind yourself that you might, hate your weight, but you love your eyes and you love your smile. And if you, or you might, just hate yourself because you're sad and you're depressed, and you might think that it's your fault, but there are things about yourself that you do love, like the way you laugh, or, the way your eye moves when you smile, or, I have a twitch when I'm in sunlight or I'm in water, one of my eyes closes. I love that about myself because it's a joke that my mom loves it. And there's things that you can do to empower yourself that are so small that have such a giant impact. If you have a safety blanket, cut it off. If you have a safety blanket, get rid of it. Bringing yourself out of your comfort zone is the best way to fall in love with yourself. And I truly mean that. And I'm not trying to shame people who don't have the ability to do that. Everybody has different abilities and strengths and coping mechanisms, and they're all valid, and they're all supposed to be embraced, and we're all supposed to be empowering each other. And I'm not saying people who have a hard time coping should be looked down upon, or that people who have a hard time, telling themselves they love themselves. I've been there, and I'm not for a second saying that that's wrong or taking the time to cope, or people who can't cope are wrong. I'm saying that there are little things you can do to make yourself smile a little bit more each day. And even if that doesn't, heal you completely, at least you've got a smile on your face for 2 seconds. Like, it's worth that moment of, like, how people compliment you and you get really happy? That you're doing it to yourself, and that's empowering because you're loving yourself and you're not relying on other people for that love. Anything I'd like to say with somebody struggling to trauma, specifically talking about rape, but also trauma in general, is that it was somebody else's choice to then do something to you. and that is not your shame to hold, that is not your guilt to feel, but instead take the time to cope, take the time to take care of you. You know, your mental health and your health comes before anything else that society is telling you is important. You need to take care of you and take the time to take care of yourself, and do it without hurting people around you, I think is very important. You know, don't take it out on other people because they didn't make the choice to do it either. But really empowering yourself and just telling yourself, like, I'm going to take this time, I'm going to do what's right for me, I'm going to get through this. And it might take a day, it might take 10 days, it might take a year, it might take a lifetime, who knows? But every day I'm going to work a little bit closer to loving me. And I'm going to work a little bit closer to understanding that, you know, he or she made this decision to do this to me, and I now, you know, have a chance to do something good with it, even though it is something terrible that should have never happened. And you have the option to do that. And I'm not saying it's going to heal you or it's going to, you know, completely change your life, but I can tell you right now that it's going to make, even if it only makes the littlest difference, it's a difference that's worth it. And there's so much that I could say. I've already been talking for like 30 minutes, and I know a lot of this is going to have to be cut out. But I think, again, not shaming each other for coping is the biggest thing I want to say. Don't shame each other for the way we cope and the way we heal. Empower each other. Really take the time to start to understand each other and attempt to grow as a society and as a community, regardless of, you know, these other girls are talking about depression and eating disorders. And I really want to say, like, I really hope and wish for nothing but the best for you ladies, and that you guys are doing incredible things, and I hope for nothing but the best for what you're doing, and for however you coped and however you healed. I'm proud that you did it, and if you aren't yet, I'm proud that you continue to do it. And just because you don't do it in the way I did it, or I don't do it in the way you did it, not for a second should we shame each other or treat each other differently for it. Some people take an entire lifetime, and some people don't ever get there. Some people can do it overnight, and some people it takes years. Some people it takes, you know, a long time, and some people it doesn't, and that's okay. But just know that it's not your shame and it's not your guilt to hold. It's, you know, it's something that you have to work at, and you have to accept that happened, but you don't have to accept it happening again. You don't have to accept it changing your life for the negative. You can make it something positive once you get to the point of acceptance and forgiveness. And I want to touch on forgiveness just as my last point. I teach forgiveness and empowerment, not because they deserve your forgiveness, but you deserve to forgive and move on. And, you know, it really does take a long time to forgive and to accept and to do something with your pain. But I'm telling you that they might not deserve your forgiveness, but you deserve you deserve to forgive people. You deserve to feel forgiveness in your heart and not hold on to something so terrible, and keep it as part of you, and keep it as something that you can use to improve yourself and improve the lives of others, and really learn something from it and teach others and educate and change something in yourself or in somebody else, whatever your choice is. But also that, you know, however you're coping is okay, as long as, you know, but keep it non-destructive. Make sure that your coping is positive, and make sure you empower each other, and please know that you deserve to forgive even if they don't deserve your forgiveness. And I really do teach forgiveness and empowerment as a main focal point because I think it's the most important thing in healing. So thank you guys so much for listening to me, and I hope that made sense. I feel like I rambled. And again, thank you, Jack, for the leeway. I've had a crazy week. And head over, follow my Instagram account at Start the Convo Proj. It's really just about me trying to empower you guys and sharing my story and sharing the stories of others. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm not saying this to plug me, but like so that you guys can hear the stories of these incredible women and men who are coming forward and sharing their stories. And you know what I did the other day to educate people on a day where I didn't want to feel like a victim any longer. I wanted to feel like I was doing something, and I really hope that you guys go look at that and follow that and really use it as something empowering and as something that you guys can use in everyday coping. And if you guys ever need anything, reach out through that project. My email is linked in that, as well as I just told you the handle. You can DM me. There are thousands of ways to get in touch with me, and you can find them all on that account. So please feel free to reach out and to, you know, get resources from me and use me as a resource to further your healing and your coping, because we can work together and help each other. So if you guys ever need anything, feel free to reach out and feel free to ask questions and get involved. And I would love to get involved with any movements or anything that you guys are doing to help empower you guys for whatever trauma or pain that you are going through, that we can take it and turn it into something positive, and that you can feel forgiveness and empowerment for you.
I just need to take a second and thank all of them. They continue to support me in this podcast, and they also contribute when called upon. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Tori. Now, why are coping skills so important? What do you do when you get a really bad grade? Do you isolate, sit in your room for a couple hours? That's a coping skill. Not a positive one, but still. What about when a family member passes away? Do you cry? That's a healthy coping skill. Or maybe your girlfriend or boyfriend wants to take a break. Do you go out and party with your friends? That is also a coping skill. For me, I've always considered coping skills to be ineffective until, pretty recently. I bought a diffuser which uses water along with a few drops of essential oil. Typically I use lavender, eucalyptus, or pink grapefruit. These are very soothing scents that can fill a room in 10 to 20 minutes. Think of coping, though, as the roadmap for recovery, because there are pathways for any mental health condition. For me, I usually take the path, until recently, that clearly says, "You idiot, you're going towards a dead end." It's true, though. I've always taken a path that is easy, but it always leads me into a trouble zone. And there's something to be said for that, because when you take the easy path, it really just means you're cutting corners and you're not doing what you need to do. So I either get sent back for a screening, a psychiatric screening, or I end up in a group therapy setting. It was one time, truly, where I took the road not traveled, the path with no end point, no destination. It was simply a journey that has led me to believe that life is truly worth living, So what are the most effective coping skills? It's very based on your sense of boredom, because when you become bored, your thoughts are allowed to travel, up in the head very freely, meaning you might think about like suicide, self-harm, or getting, very, very drunk. There's a word that has a very literal meaning when it comes to helping you stop those thoughts. Grounding techniques. Grounding is a literal way to bring your consciousness away from the thoughts up in your head, and it brings you right back to where you are in the now. It's a very present feeling. You'll feel it physically. So here are the 3 important grounding techniques that I have used. Stretching your legs. When you're thinking of, suicide or self-harm or any of those things, and you just start stretching your legs, or you get up and you walk around for a minute, those feelings are gone. The thoughts are gone for a short amount of time, but if you keep doing it on a routine, it really helps. Jumping jacks are another thing because, exercise, but the most important one is the senses trick. Out of nowhere, I set a reminder on my phone twice a day, and I have to write down 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I feel. Most of the times it can be physical, but it can also be like what you feel, like an emotion. 2 things you smell, and a positive affirmation about yourself. But what's important to know about coping is it's not all these things work for everyone. And that's why I said it's very based on your sense of boredom. Some people, playing a video game is a coping skill. For me it is too. I just didn't mention it because sometimes it can grow to be an unhealthy one. The other coping mechanisms I find important are adult coloring books. I mean, the mandalas especially, those are amazing to work with. Yeah, I would use colored pencils. The crayons are terrible because you go outside the lines and it bugs the shit out of me. Taking a walk, or walking your dog too. Listening to uplifting music. Sorry, depressive songs are very bad for you. Something to be said for that though, because I'm pretty much a hypocrite in that issue. Drinking water, especially when you take a walk from the classroom or lecture hall. It's actually a very soothing thing to do, especially if it's cold. Taking a 20 to 30 minute warm, not hot, shower or bath finally, I think the best one is setting up goals for the day and doing a checkoff list, like a to-do list. It's very soothing to know that you have accomplished something. Well, look at that. We are out of time.
Back in time and through your heart.
Don't worry, we'll be back next week with episode 9. So, as always, thank you for your listening and subscribing, and we will see you next time.
You know I'd take it for you.